Hi there, and welcome to Unfiltered Solopreneur, the podcast where we share real, unvarnished stories of people who dared to break free from the corporate grind. I'm your host, Nikhil, and I'm passionate about helping solopreneurs like you turn their dreams into reality. Some people experience loss and feel stuck. Others, like Zuri Gunther, transform their pain into purpose. Her journey from corporate recruiter to life coach proves that healing isn't about moving on, but about moving forward with intention, resilience, and self discovery. Here are some insights that stood out to me. First, grief is what we make it. Zuri showed us that grief doesn't have to be something we passively endure, it's something we can actively shape. She chose to see grief as an expression of love rather than simply absence. And that shift allowed her to heal rather than just survive. Now, this doesn't erase the pain, but it makes space for growth alongside it. As solopreneurs, setbacks and losses are inevitable, but how we process and evolve from them determines our success. Authenticity over everything. For Zuri, who you are is your greatest asset. Whether in coaching or recruiting, she always focused on making real human connections, not just transactions. She didn't just help people find jobs, she helped them show up confidently as themselves. That same energy now fuels her work in guiding clients through grief, loss, and transformation. In business and in life, people connect with authenticity, not perfection. The importance of self-care. Zuri's commitment to her own healing is a reminder that self-care isn't optional, it's foundational. Solopreneurs often wear too many hats. We juggle endless demands, but if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of your business. Prioritizing your well-being isn't selfish. It's what allows you to show up fully for your clients, your business, and yourself. The courage to be seen. Zuri's journey from considering a TED Talk to embracing this podcast shows that stepping into visibility is a process. Being seen for who you truly are can feel daunting, but it's also what creates the biggest impact. I know this is a scary step for many solopreneurs, myself included, but remember, visibility isn't just about marketing. It's also about making real human connections and building trust. Zuri's approach to solopreneurship mirrors her approach to life. She doesn't fight challenges, she transforms them. Instead of avoiding grief, she reshaped it into something meaningful. Instead of fearing visibility, she stepped into it. If you've ever struggled with grief, loss, uncertainty, or self-doubt about your solopreneur journey, this conversation will shift your perspective. See you on the other side. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil Vaish, your host, founder, and CEO of Boost Solo. My next guest turned unimaginable loss into a mission of healing, helping others rediscover themselves through grief and transformation. A former corporate recruiter turned life coach, she blends chakra alignment with deep inner work to guide clients on their journey of self-discovery. Zuri, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you here, and I'm excited for our conversation. So let me start by asking, you mentioned to me that your journey began with getting to the root of grief and anger. Could you share how your personal experience with loss led you to discover your path to helping others?
Absolutely. So it was about 4 years ago that my son was killed. He was 19 at the time. And when that happened, it was unimaginable. Nobody plans for their child to be killed. And when that happened, it was just a time of shock, not just for me, but for my son's siblings, for his friends, for a lot of different people. And being able to kind of just hone in on what was going on in the situation, but also trying to be there for others at the same time causes a lot of different emotions to run through, one's body. And so the best thing that I could do at the time was just be responsible for how I was feeling. And it was a time of loss, and you just don't know what's going to come back. Even being unimaginable, like, did this really happen? And honing in on my experience as far as being calm, that's just a natural, innate response that I had to a lot of different adversities prior to that. but being able to own those feelings and then just kind of hone in, like I said, on being calm and move through that process is what helped me heal. It caused me to slow down, be intentional about what I was thinking, and practice those metacognitive skills that I can attest to 4 years removed from the, tragedy, as a journey of healing, and not just, going through a situation, but actually growing through it and processing it, to where I have the experience I have today as a healed healer, not a wounded healer that's helping others, but actually healed from that process.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know a lot of people struggle with getting through grief, right? So I'm just
Yeah,
amazed at how you sort of walked through that and sort of got to the other side.
absolutely. Yeah.
So let me ask you now, and I'm going to change tracks just a little bit to talk about your
Okay.
corporate career. Now, you spent a lot of years in recruiting, right?
Yes,
And that was sort of centered on bridging people with opportunity. So
absolutely. Yep.
what parallels do you see between those experiences and helping clients reconnect with themselves through your coaching?
So it's actually interesting that you asked me that, simply because I think that lots of times we can get caught up in our roles as the title or as the label that it is, and we forget to bring our soft skills with us. When we say soft skills, it's actually a strength. And I think that we kind of think it's convoluted and we separate who we are, what our innate ability is as people, and we just kind of focus on our qualifications and our skills. But one thing that I've always prided myself on is having interpersonal skills as well as emotional intelligence. And so when I would talk to a lot of my different candidates, they were very nervous showing up to an interview. It's like, oh God, please hire me. And I would talk them off the ledge before we do our phone screens and just say, hey, calm down. You're a person. I'm a person. Let's talk through this. You made it through, the process up until this point. You weeded out 150 candidates. So just take a deep breath and show up. And, seeing people have that transformation right there in those few seconds and just calm down, they're able to fully show up and be themselves. And that's by connecting with the person, not the title or what my job skills were. It was being, meeting the person where they're at. And so being able to do that in my corporate journey and, having that be part of my personal experience is absolutely why, I am a self-proclaimed and also, proclaimed, as my other clients would say, wonderful coach, to be able to have this, opportunity to take this journey with people with, a topic as heavy as grief. Um, I know a lot of people really struggle with that, just seeing people on social media, and it's not to discount what they're feeling. But I have seen a lot of other people that are proclaiming to do the same thing. And I think what stands out is lots of times we try to find commonality, because you want to talk to somebody that's gone through this before. But I think there's a fine line with finding the commonality and also showing someone how to heal through that process versus finding the commonality and just staying there. And that's been, the biggest goal for me when I talk to clients, just like in corporate. The end goal is to get that job, put them in front of the manager. But the end goal here is to not have the delayed grief, to not have the heavy feelings and emotions that we sometimes suppress because we're so busy trying to get back to life and pay the bills and take care of the kids and, just get back to what we call normal, that we sometimes dismiss a lot of those feelings because we don't know where to turn. It's counseling that kind of talks things in a circle, talks about things until, you're blue in the face, or it's, I know what you're feeling, but there's no tools to move forward. And so that's my ultimate goal, just like getting that job. What are the tools to move forward so that you are healing and even honoring your loved one, living fully in the present, and honoring their legacy day by day? So whatever the anniversary date is, it doesn't look like the day that it happened. It looks different. It mirrors your life to present day.
Yeah, I'm sure people watching this will be sort of amazed at how you can talk about it, right? In terms of the way you talk about it, sort of the joy you still bring when you talk
Yeah.
about the memory of your son, as
Yeah.
if it's a living memory, right? And that's what I love about
Absolutely.
the way you describe it and the way you sort of live with it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, if I can kind of just speak to this, it's ironic that we're speaking January 28th, because January 24th was actually the fourth year since his passing. And I love profound moments. I love moments that I'm able to teach from. And I think that's something that I also pride myself on is taking this journey. And when I speak to clients, it's my real life experience. It's this happened to me today, and this is, how you can learn from it. But being in the fourth year, uh, Friday was the 24th, and I knew that day was coming. But for whatever reason, when the day came, I actually didn't think about it at all.
Really? Yeah.
It's not that I forgot, but
Mhm.
there was nothing that was sad about the day. It wasn't until 2 years, 2 hours before, it was the 25th, and I'm wrapping up notes from a client, and I look down and I'm like, today's the 24th. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And in that moment, it was such gratitude that came over me, because to be able to, get to a point where I'm not reliving it, I'm not having those feelings of, at 1 o'clock it happened and 2 o'clock the police were here. Like, it wasn't any of those things. It was, wow, this is my life 4 years removed. And I never thought that this would be the case. And I thought about all of the things that happened that day and all the smiles and all the laughs, and even called my children, because I'm like, nobody reached out to me today to say anything. And so I reached out to them just to see if they would bring it up. And nobody did. It was just like, oh, how was your day? And I'm kind of just waiting, like, okay, it's coming. It never came. And so, that spoke volumes to me about resilience and tenacity and making the choice to heal, have it be your own healing process, because I don't think that would have been the case if I chose differently. I had to be a pillar, not just for myself and my own healing, but my children as well. And because I showed them, that it is possible to see grief as love, because that was the root of why you would even feel grief, speaks volumes to them. And when I finally did bring it up, his older brother was like, oh my gosh, you know? And it was like we knew at the same time, without the other person saying, like, we are healed. It's
Right.
still a process. Every day is going to look different, but he would want this. He wouldn't want, like, oh, you forgot about the day, and he wouldn't want you to feel bad. It was like, I'm in college, 4 years removed, and here's his daughter jumping on my couch. And, we're doing all of these things. We're traveling, and we carry his memory every day, every single day. And not just in a way that's like, oh, today happened. It's like, you're with us every day, and it's happy. I can't say that was the case before. Um, I did commemorate it in a way that was like, awake almost.
Yeah.
And you have to process it in what feels right for you. But the 24th would come, and I would make soul food, and I would, have just people that were close to me come over, and we'd sit around, but you could feel the heaviness,
Yeah.
and it would just be for that one day, and then you'd move on the next day. But it's like, just think about other disappointments in your life. You don't necessarily relive that. Oh, this was the anniversary of when I lost my job. Like, you grow through it and you see what makes you better, and not trying to, minimize, someone leaving physically, but you see it in a different light when you don't just see them as a physical aspect, when you see them as a spiritual being, as a person that left memories, as as a an energy that never dies, because that's what they become. you know you don't miss them like that, because they're still here. You can still feel them. And again, 4 years removed, from that day, I sit here and I smile and I talk to you about my son, and I can see him and his pranks and his jokes and hear his laugh, because there was a profound moment, in the first video I made. I talk about that. I talk about thinking about his life, and then being at a point where I started thinking about his death,
Yeah.
and I could not get up. I couldn't move. But then I had a choice
Right.
in that moment. What is the rest of your life going to look like? And you make that choice as to what you want it to look like. You still got to go through the process. But 4 years removed, making the choice to allow his legacy to live is why I can sit here and have this conversation as if it never happened.
Yeah, and that is amazing. I mean, and as you said, it is a profound loss, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
little different than losing your job, or the people go through all sorts of things. But I think a lot of
Yes.
people feel like there are certain losses that you are walls and you cannot get through them, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's the amazing thing. And you walked in those shoes when you help these people.
Yeah.
It's not from a textbook. It's not from, things that
No.
you've learned from other people.
Yep.
And you are living the talk. So, and
Absolutely.
I love how you talk about how as long as he's there in your memory, he's still alive, he's still there, right? In terms of
Yeah.
he's still living,
Yeah.
whatever that word means in terms of,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I can't remember what we were doing. It was just something, I think we were at a movie theaters or something and having some food. And I was there with one of his friends that was really close to him. And we were talking about him, and it was almost like you could hear his laugh. Like, he would laugh right here at this point, and being able to share that with someone else, they were part of his life in a different capacity. I was his mother, but you were his friend. But we have this common energy because we knew him so well, that couldn't happen if, one wasn't healing, if you just continue to think about, the physical part of them not being here. But it's a wonderful experience if you choose, to be able to have that be your experience. And I know it's a hard conversation, and it's not going to be for everyone, but I'm kind of just, that voice that's like, I know that this is what we perceive death to be. But from my lived experience, my authentic experience, I'm here to tell you that it actually can be different. There's a different side to it. I think that death is something that we don't talk about because we're afraid.
yeah,
It's a subject that we kind of just shy away from, and this is actually a way of life. It's not, this is what I'm doing to help you get through something, and then I live something totally different when I'm off screen. It's a way of life. And I think when we're intentional about wanting to feel good, whatever that looks like, that is your default. Um, that being said, we prepare for a lot of things. We prepare for retirement, and, we prepare for when we're going on vacation. Um, and those are planned things. And we all know death is coming,
yeah.
but when you change the way that you live and the way that you think, it's almost like a paradigm shift. This has been kind of what we said that it is, but you switch how your perspective is about it and you have a different experience.
Yeah, and I think that it'll be very valuable for a lot of people listening to just the way you talk about it, and all the experience that you've had and how you sort of live it today, even.
Yeah.
And I think, and I genuinely think what you were saying earlier. It's like people just don't know how to deal with grief, and I think that's gotten more complicated over the last,
Yeah.
since social media and all those kinds of things. Because I think we think we do things or get through things, but we're not really, right? I feel
Yeah.
like there's like, it's like I'll give you a bad analogy, but like uh, liking a nonprofit thing or saving whales on Facebook is not actually having had any kind of impact or done anything, right? But
Yeah.
you could tell yourself, oh my God, I did a good deed today. And I think we
Yeah.
do a lot of that. And we also are taught to compartmentalize. And people, I
Yes.
think, believe that, oh, if I just set it aside here, let it
Hmm.
sit there, it's not going to bother all the things I do here. But that's
That's
not
right.
how we work, right?
That's
I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
takes our entirety to go to work, to get through work, to build relationships, to be with people, to, do everything that we do. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you explained it perfectly. I think even going throughout the process, I can't talk to you about delayed grief in the first year or the second year, but I can talk to you about delayed grief the third and fourth year,
right.
because it is a process. And it's something that you see happen because if you do suppress it because you're trying to get back to what we again call normal, then those emotions are coming. It has to go somewhere. Everything has to go somewhere. But you're seeing those emotions happen in a way that's not healthy. It's not conducive. And you don't really know, like, why did I have that emotional outburst? And then having to backtrack and get to the root of the problem instead of kind of just dealing with it as you go along. It's a real thing. I was talking to a young lady that has a Pilates business and just simply telling her, what it is that I do and how I help people that have their own businesses or, just different walks of life. Because when you have your own business, you're responsible for working in and on your business sometimes.
Yeah.
And when you have these blocks and you can hear a song or smell something that reminded you of a past loved one and you're stuck right there and you haven't even translated what happened because it's suppressed.
Right.
And so, when we were talking about chakra healing, that's part of the thing that, one of the tools that I use in my coaching to help them grow through that, because you've suppressed it so much. You might be afraid of, rejection or abandonment, or have feelings of guilt. And our chakras deal with each one of those things. And so we work energetically, to rid ourselves and free ourselves of those fears and replace them with our authentic energy. Because, when I'm talking about this, I like to refer back to when we were children. When you're a child or you see children at a funeral, they're not crying,
No,
they're kind
true.
of just standing there and observing like what's going on because it's new to them. And then as you're part of, society in this world, then you start learning like this is what's supposed to happen when this happens. And so then we cry and we do all the things. But again, in another part of the country, or I'm sorry, the world, that's not how they respond to grief. That's not
True.
how they respond to someone ascending. It's like, you finished your assignment, and that's exactly how I look at that. Like my son, oh God, I could just tell you so many funny things about him. But one of the things, and one of the signs that was big for me that he truly had an impact and finished his assignment was just who showed up to his service. It was people from 6 different states in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Preschool teacher, high school teacher. He had 4 jobs, in his short life, and all of HR from every job showed up, and I'm like, this person doesn't know this person, but you're standing in solidarity to commemorate my son. He had that type of impact, and so it would be a shame if I wasn't able to see that because I was so struck by, this heavy feeling. Again, I've been kind with myself. I've been gentle with myself, but being able to go back and see those moments like, I'm not going to let that die. Love is unconditional. The condition of his physical death shouldn't die too. Like this unconditional love that I have for him. As I'm telling my story, I could be healing parents. And because they've gotten to a point where they've healed, they can now heal their children. Their children have a different experience. Then those children can go spread love to, their schoolmates. It's just about, each one teaching one. And I can't say that I don't know everything, but I haven't heard someone talk about death like this before. It may have been different when I was, going through my process, or I may have reached out to them like we're like minded, but it was almost like fighting through this,
Yeah.
talking about it and people kind of, is that really what is happening with you? Like, are you sure? Are you sure you're not processing it? Because you're just kind of, it's like, I'm already going through this, but now I have to convince you that I'm okay and that this is real. And, not to be rude, but you just get to the point, it's like, it's not about you. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just living my life and allowing my, I like to say, like, move in silence and let your success be the noise. Like, I'm moving in silence about how and what works for me with my grief process. It's not going to look the same for everyone, but I'm being intentional, just like I am about anything else. We talked about corporate recruiting. If I'm being intentional about putting a resume together to present to an employer, I'm intentionally putting my energy, and everything into that. I'm intentionally choosing to heal in a
Yeah.
way that's conducive, so I just think that's a beautiful thing to be able to give to someone that love their loved one, and they don't want to sit there with that heavy feeling. They want to know it's okay. It's absolutely okay if you choose to have a different experience.
Yeah, and if I may say, I think he's still having an impact in the way that you live with him and the impact you're having on people who are sort of
Yes.
going through similar things. So that impact
Yep.
hasn't stopped, right? So
Hasn't stopped.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yep. And that's a big way to show like my love, for my son is you're still going to your energy was so impactful. It's still going to touch people around the world, because of what you gave to me as your mom.
yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing your stories, Zuri. And
Thank you.
I want to now, you touched on something before about working on and in your business. I want to come back and talk a little bit about your solopreneur journey. Now, one of the
Yeah.
things you mentioned to me that you had this nagging feeling that sort of in the corporate world that sort of pushed you to go out on your own, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that moment and why you trusted your intuition to sort of lead you into this new chapter?
You know, it's funny that you asked that because it's like I knew before, but just like with needing to get back to, normal life, it's like, oh, I've got these bills, and oh, I've got this, and I've got that. And I think that's part of how we lose ourselves sometimes. Now, there is the necessity to do that. I'm not telling anybody like don't take care of what it is that you're supposed to take care of, but I think that for me, I started to kind of get lost in translation because that is where I spent the majority of my time. And being in HR, you do have to spend a lot of your mental strength, working through problems. And so when I would talk to candidates, they would go on my LinkedIn and say, "Oh, you're a coach too, and what do you coach to?" And then I would tell them about that, and they're like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Well, this is still part of me coaching and all the things," but it would just be in the back of my mind, like, yes, you've made an impact, but it's so much bigger than this. It's so much bigger than this because you've been given or dealt a very unique situation, and how you dealt with it is beyond these four walls, And so knowing that and kind of getting up every day, I felt very torn, day after day after day. And one particular person that I talked to, he started crying, and I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't mean for that to happen, but he just resonated so much with what I was saying. It took him back to when he lost his father. And he's like, have you ever considered going on TED Talk? And I think that was just the conviction for me right there, because he thought that much of what it was that I was saying. And even though I felt it, he's like, you need to be on someone's stage, talking to someone about this, because just in my phone screen period of time, you have really witnessed to me, and my dad passed away when I was a kid. He said, but people need to hear that. And so hearing that, it was just like, I can't get up anymore and just wonder what if, and allow it to fall by the wayside or not give it my full attention, because it's really part of who I am. It's not something that I can control. It has now become part of who I am. And so, that's what helped me make that decision. And every day is different, like kind of you get up with your alarm clock and you got to log on, you got to do this, you got to
Yeah.
go through the motions, but every single day is different. And I enjoy that, because you get to see the miracle in it all. You get to see like, oh, I'm on the right path, because you don't know where it's coming from, and I think that's part of our, spiritual experience as well, is that, you have that faith and you have that trust that it's all going to be okay. And then you see it come together, so it's like, if you never take those leaps
Yeah.
of faith, you just never know what's possible.
True. You have to start.
Have to
And have you done a TED Talk? Because I agree with him. I think you should definitely have a TED Talk. I think
No,
it
it
helps
is a
so many
desire.
people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
anyone
No, it is.
listening, invite Zuri to TED.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it is a desire of mine, to have a TED Talk. I'm working on it. But yeah, that's absolutely a desire. And I'll tell you something else that's funny. Even the fact that we're on, this podcast, when you start to do this, you really are trying to figure out which way to go, and as natural as this seems for me, I think we have a fear of being seen a lot of times. And I kind of struggled with, well, which way should I go? Like which niche should I pick as far as helping people? Because you've known this, you've got a history of doing this coaching, but this was a small portion. And I'm like, but this is so much more impactful, So it's like, do I do the one-on-one clients? And my fiance laughs at me all the time because he's like, you like to talk. And I was like, I do like to talk. He's like, but it's a good thing because you connect with people through that, So by doing podcasts and having interviews and talking on the stage, that is actually an avenue to be able to have people see you and have that impact versus, kind of being behind the camera. That's something that I still struggle with a little bit because it's not live. It's just me getting on and recording and doing all the things. But the live conversations for me and seeing people in the audience, because I've done a couple speeches already and speaking engagements, that is everything to me because it's real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how you have the reels and the stories and you're kind of acting like you're talking. That's hard for me because I'm like, I'm not really living that situation, but showing up authentically is very, very natural for me. So I'm excited to be on the journey and have this be a way that I do attract, clients, because I can really feel it's like an exchange of energy. They can see
Yeah.
that there's genuineness there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's just even the topic where, as we talked about, it's like a very difficult subject for a lot of people. And I haven't heard
Yeah.
anybody actually talk about it the way you do, right? In terms of, and
Yeah.
it's, and I know it's authentic. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yep.
you're not saying this to say it. You're not,
No.
you can smell that from a mile away, in a sense, so
Yeah.
to speak. But
Yeah.
also the other thing you said, which I think is really interesting, is that, going back to being a kid, like we get so many layers on us, right? Because you come
Yeah.
out completely like everything is wonder, right?
Yep.
And then, like you said, there's an expectation that, oh, in this situation, you should react this way. In
Yep.
this situation, you should be this way, right? And one
Yep.
of the things I've been doing, and I'm interested to hear you as a solopreneur, sort of starting to shed some of those,
Mhm.
layers that I've accumulated over the years.
Yeah.
And it's
Yep.
hard to do because you sort of like,
Mhm.
you expect to, you sort of have your blinders on a little bit in terms of
Mhm.
how you're supposed to function.
Yep.
And I think that's it's one of the joys and the scary things, right? Like,
Mhm.
even for me, it's like, I'm not, I'm more of an introvert. I'm like, I'm getting on this podcast, doing this podcast was like the first step, and now live
Yeah.
things will be sort of the next step. But I think,
Yeah.
but that's the fun part of the journey too, because that's growth to me, right? As somebody
Absolutely.
once said, I think I had a guest on, and she said, if I'm not scared, then if I'm scared, I know I'm in the right place.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, public speaking, I used to just be like, no, like, don't look at me. Oh my God. And now I'm like, hello, how are you? And just embracing that. But to your point about, growing through the fears that we begin to take on as we become adults. That's one of my favorite things to talk about because it doesn't just apply to learned reactions and behaviors in a subject such as grief. It applies to so many different things. Like, if you talk about imposter syndrome, it's like, how do you get there? Like, I can tell you, we're talking about authenticity. I am not being an imposter right now.
Yeah.
It's my authentic experience. You ask me to do something, I'm going to come forward with my full self. And I'm not worried about, oh my God, can I do this? Because it is part of who I am. And I think that, lots of times when we start to deal with imposter syndrome, you get to a place and you're just like, oh my God, can I do this? You start questioning a lot of your decisions leading up to that point. Like, if we just play out a scenario, as a kid, you're being a kid. I'm so grateful for my grandchildren. One of my granddaughters that live here. I love just watching her play and just live her best life and do her thing because she is authentically her. And being careful not to say, oh, don't do that, or don't, like, obviously you don't want them to do anything dangerous, but allowing her to express herself fully has been such an eye-opening experience. And then going through the process of growing up, you see how one can get programmed. So think about this when you hear parents say, you better act right. It's like you're literally telling them to act. What is acting right as a child? You're telling them to be something other than what they're not versus behave. Okay, well, behave, same thing. What are they doing that, unless they're going to hurt themselves or something, let them be them because you don't know how that's going to translate when they become adults,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, my youngest son, he just did not have a filter when he was growing up, and he would just say things, and I would be like, oh my God, and people like, it's okay. Growing up, that has helped him. He's found his voice in a lot of different ways to be able to express himself versus not being able to, So if you go through a scenario where, you're telling a child, do this, do that, no, this is what I want you to do, you get to, that age group between maybe 17 and 21. And that's very sensitive because do I want to go to college? Nowadays, kids don't want to go to college,
No.
they want to kind of just do something else. But for us, individuals where our parents told us what we had to do, like, you're going to college and you're gonna be a doctor, and a lot of those people get to this point where they start developing imposter syndrome
Yeah.
because they were told what they had to do, even being an adult, or we're not going to back you with finances. We're not going to help you get through this because you were controlled into that. And then you became a wife and a mom, and all of these other things are added on to you. And before you don't even recognize yourself. It's like, well, tell me about yourself. Oh, well, I'm the VP of blah, blah, blah. That's great. But who are you? You have a question mark there, and then it's just like behind closed doors, there's just that quiet time, and you're just like, who am I actually? So when you go and you undo all of those things, it's called shadow work. That's also something that I specialize in, is shadow work, going back to not just heal. You hear people talk about, healing your inner child. that child that we talked about, that's who they're talking about before all of the programming. But what happens when you heal that part of you? You also want to bring attributes from being a child to your adulthood.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, that's when you show up scared. Kids do things that they're scared about all the time, and then they prove to themselves that they can do it. So when you're pulling those aspects into your adult self, it's like, oh my holy cow, for whatever reason, we start, shedding that when we adopt those attributes, and so going back to, and that's why I talked about that in the beginning, going back to when you think about a child at a funeral, because that is something that we can relate to and see, like, absolutely, you're seeing that transformation because they're not crying. And then what happens when you become an adult? I can remember being 7 at my grandmother's funeral.
Yeah.
I wasn't crying. I was just like,
What is going
I
on?
like her shoes.
Right.
What is she doing? Like, I
Yeah.
was just very curious. And remember, it was my great grandmother. But just seeing her, and I'm like, who's this lady? She was full blood Indian. And I'm like, who's the lady with the red face and all this long, like, who is that? And I'm like, that's your great grandma, very curious. But it wasn't a lot of, sadness and stuff. And then when I hear about all of the awesome things that she did, that's what I think about. I don't
Yeah.
think about the doom and gloom and she's no longer here. I didn't get to know her, like everyone else knew her. I was only 7. But I feel her still. She was into astrology and all these things. And I'm like, she was so cool, So being able to have this experience with death and even tie it back to those that went before I thought of death this way is so being so close and being my son, it allows me to still go back and think about my great grandmother and my grandmother and the things that they did in a way that's like, my son is with my great grandmother and my grandmother, and they're up there doing things. They're like my guardian angel, watching over me. You didn't ask about this, but I do want to mention this because I think it's important. Part of my curriculum now is also speaking to people that say things when they hear, someone has lost someone. So, for instance, if I say, oh, I lost my son 4 years ago, and I was like, oh, so sorry for your loss. It's like, that's not really appropriate anymore. And it's not to bash anyone, but it's more so about making people aware. So I had, somebody that I partner with, and he asked me about my business. He's like, how did you come up with the name? And I told him, and he's just like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I was like, it's okay. He's chilling with God right now and having himself a good time in the spirit world. That caught him off guard that I would say that. But it's like, when you think about, if you're really intentional about what's coming next, that is a learned response. If you're not careful, if you're not thinking about it. But if you say, hey, I lost someone and blah, blah, blah. It's like, you know what? I can tell that they were very special to you. What's your favorite memory that you carry with you every day? That is completely different because it is intentional about allowing the person that's receiving that to elevate their thoughts about their loved one and to take them into a place that's, evolving and helping them feel happy about their loved one versus sorry for your loss takes them backwards, and it's like, what are you sorry for? It's just something that we automatically say because we don't know what to say.
True.
So I think it's important for people that are on that receiving end or just kind of think about what you would want someone to say to you in that moment. And again, I think it's something important to point out because we just need that guidance sometime, to be able to help people in a time of loss. One of my friends called me when this happened and I started laughing, like literally, this was like 3 days later. And she says, I just don't have any words. And I started laughing because I'm like, that was the realest thing that anyone has said to me. Like, what do you say?
Yeah.
But I could appreciate her being so real about, I don't know what to say. That was better than, sorry for your loss. We think that it's something that's helpful, but not all the time, especially 4 years later. It's, tell me about the special young man that he was or something like that,
Yeah. No, I think that you're right, though. I think it's just people just don't know how to react in that situation. And
Yeah.
also, a lot of the time, it's unprocessed. Like they've never dealt with their own grief. Everyone's lost somebody. And and also, I think, like you said, we're sort of taught to sort of, these little boxes. And what I loved something you said earlier, too, is like in the child's brain, and I think this is really great solopreneur lesson, too, is like, everything is, there's a question mark. is the way they
Yeah.
look at everything, right?
Yep.
Whereas in the adult brain, we already made the assumption. And then you
That's
sort
right.
of work backwards to sort of chip away at that and find out that's not what you thought it was, right?
That's
It's
right.
so funny because I'm like, and
Yeah.
I've been trying to do this is sort of like not, automatically go there and say, okay, that's
Yeah.
what that is, or that's
Yeah.
who that is. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that helps you grow. It helps you be more creative, and it also helps
Yeah.
the wonder and curiosity is the thing that
The
I want to
curiosity.
most tap back into, right?
Yes, yes. And I think that, especially as solopreneurs, there's so much of that out there.
Yeah.
Like I can truly tell you, like, it's so funny because I'm like, look what I did, and I'm like, I tried to do the same thing when I was, a full-time corporate employee. And I couldn't get there because it's so structured and like, this is what I had to do. But when I actually allowed myself to learn, so many different things about AI, and I'm like, I had no idea that this does this. And it's like, oh my gosh, I need this in my business, but here's the answer to that. You're allowing yourself to flow,
Yeah.
and like you said, there is that creativity, and the curiosity returns, and it translates not just in your business, but even when it comes to networking aspects. And, the sky is not even the limit when you free yourself from, the rigid restraints that you're in growing up. You unlearn those things.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of the things I love about doing this podcast is meeting people like you and so many of the guests that I've met. It's like, and that's part of the journey. It's like, otherwise you don't get to do that. So for me, it's like a perk, even though,
I'm telling you.
yeah,
Yeah, like I would have never met you if we weren't like networking, and
yeah,
having a commonality, having this conversation. It's opening yourself up. I didn't know platforms like that even existed to be able to meet new people, but yet here we are, you
yeah, I
know.
know. And it wasn't AI, just for everyone out
Right.
there. It had nothing to do with it. This was all
Yeah,
human connection,
exactly. Exactly. I love it.
which I still think is the gold standard. But that's okay.
Yes.
I've got gray
Yeah,
hair that could say that.
I know. People are like, oh,
Yeah,
you're washed out. No, I think it is too. I think it's important.
yeah.
I love AI. We're talking about it. I love AI. I think it's a powerful tool. But I truly believe in human connection because that's where it all starts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, I still love going to the cinema for movies and you can still watch it on
Yeah,
TV. You don't have to, it's not one or the other, right? It's like, I think you
exactly.
kind of figure out the place for it. So
Yes.
let me ask you now, most people have sort of an expectation or an idea when they launch their own thing. So what
Mhm.
expectations did you have and what was the reality and how did that sort of surprise or challenge you?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I think so when I first put out my YouTube video,
Yeah.
I had people respond like, and it was kind of just, it's out there and there wasn't really an expectation, but then there was a response. So I'm like, ooh, let me do that again. And I did it. And I'm like, echo, like, where are you at? Where are all the people? And so the expectation for me was I thought that it was going to happen a little bit faster than before, but it wasn't that way. It was absolutely having to do the work, come up with a lot of the different curriculum. And I think even that part is rewarding because each step in that is part of your healing process, and being able to see how it translates throughout, the client. Also, I did not expect to even be as in tune, and I thought that I was in tune with myself, probably the most I could be when this happened. But even more so, like a deeper depth of that has happened through me helping people. So much so, I think when I first started coaching, it was very important for me to help people, show them those tools and move through the process, as to where now, it's not a triggered response. Like when I tear up, I'm not crying about my son. I'm actually like feeling that person,
Right.
and I didn't expect that going into this. I expected to be, you're telling me and I'm taking notes and I'm saying the things that I need to say. But having that, ability to really sympathize and empathize with people, even though I didn't know their loved one, was, a moment for me to just appreciate and also have gratitude for, because I think people need to see that, they need to feel that. And I didn't know that I had that in me to be that soft, I should say. Raising my kids, I was a single mom for the majority of the time, and that takes a lot of grit and a lot of being strong and doing a lot of different things. But there's this softer side that has emerged from me having this connection with people, and I would not trade that for the world. I love being able for them to see my transparency and also me be vulnerable, you know.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect that going into it. I didn't expect to have it be so rewarding when we end a session, you know, and to go to bed thinking about people and how their transformation is happening, and then the gratitude that they have once we finish our sessions, and to hear them say, you know, I am now the version of myself I didn't know existed. I'm the me I never knew, you know. And that part of it, you know, we all want to be compensated monetarily, but that is a soul compensation to hear someone say that, and to see from point A to point Z, to see them come through that. I just didn't expect it to be that rewarding, you know, and it is, and I can never go back to what I was doing before, you know, maybe in junction to, because I still like helping people that way, but I couldn't just completely turn my back to this and have that be, you know, what it is that I'm doing, because it's now part of who I am.
Yeah, no, and I love what you said, because it's like you need, obviously you need to be paid because you need to pay bills and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
the gratification doesn't come from that, right?
it
It's
doesn't.
the seeing the difference you've made, the impact you've had on somebody, even with
Yeah,
the brand boost that I'm doing and stuff like that. It's just going through the
yeah,
process. People sort of discover things about themselves, and obviously, you know, the solopreneur, they are the brand.
yeah,
And years ago, I did a campaign for a nonprofit, and we called it Do Selfish, because there's actually science that says that helping other people makes us happier. And most people do not
yes,
realize this, right? This is the
yeah,
dirty little secret of like that that we hold on to, is like it actually
yeah.
it's it and that's why I say it's a selfish thing in a way. It's a good selfish thing.
It's a
But like,
good selfish
yeah,
thing.
but
Yeah,
I completely agree with you, because that's where I get my
yeah,
joy, is like, you know, when they tell me
yeah,
that this was amazing and this is how they felt and this is how it's impacted them. That is what,
yeah.
you know, makes me sleep better at night, not, you know, the check. That's important. It's
I'm
got its
telling you.
place, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I mean, there's so many things out there because everybody has an opinion, you know, and I've even seen some things to where, like, psychology wise, it's just like, oh, well, you know, you probably had a bad childhood if you like helping other people and you get your gratification from that. And I was like, I so don't agree with that. Um, I feel like that's just, if I think about who I was as a kid, you know, one of my favorite songs is Raindrops Keep
Raindrops.
Falling on My
Yeah.
Head. Yes. And I'm like, you've always been this, you know, Care Bears and Rainbows person. You've always been that way. You've always liked to see people smile. You've always liked to help. My career started in hospitality and healthcare. You know, I was a bedside caregiver, and it speaks before any, you know, before it was like bills and all these things. It speaks to who I am, and that just, it changes, just like grief. It changes throughout that process. You still have that heart to help people, but just what it looks like changes. And you know, at this part of my life, it's changed to this. You're
Yeah.
still helping people, but you know, I think, again, being in a place where you can just be vulnerable and say, hey, this happened, let me help you, speaks volumes, you know, to anybody, to other coaches that are doing this. And I have met quite a bit, you know, that I just didn't know was out there. We have our different styles, but still people using their experience to say, you know, come link arms with me, I think is such a beautiful thing to be able to do that. I met a gentleman and he was talking about his mom and how he just thought that she was just this mean little old lady, but she actually had Alzheimer's, and how much fun he had with her, you know, considering it was a situation he couldn't change.
Yeah.
But he had so much fun loving on his mom through that, because, you know, if you know anything about dementia and Alzheimer's, I used to work with those patients in the earlier part of my career. But it can be fun, you know. They are kind of just making up things, and it's just like you take the cards that you're dealt and you do what you can to bring that joy. And again, I think it's a choice. I think it's a perspective that we all can learn from and choose to have, because we can't change those situations, you know.
You know, I completely agree. In fact, my father had Alzheimer's dementia. And I remember
Hmm.
the doctor, the first thing he told us, he was like a geriatric specialist. He said, if he says the sky is pink, just say, yeah, it's such a beautiful
Yes,
color.
that's right. The
Yeah,
sky's
don't, you
pink.
know, because there's nothing,
Don't argue.
yeah, don't argue unless he's going to hurt
Yeah,
himself or harm himself in
right.
some way.
Yep.
just go
Yep.
with it, just go with the
Just go
flow.
with
And it
it.
changed my whole perspective. And like you said, it's
I'm
like,
telling you.
and it was fun then, right?
It
It was
was
like, I
fun.
loved
Yeah.
spending time with him. We would go for these drives and talk about absolute nonsense. Like
Nothing.
we'd
Yeah.
go park in the golf course because he taught me how to play golf, and we would
Yes.
pretend we were playing around a golf or we had just finished, and we would
Yes.
have these crazy conversations that were not rooted in reality, but it didn't
Yeah.
matter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I agree. It's just that it's how we sort of get set, right? It's going back to what you were saying. The weight we carry
Yep.
grows as we get older. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. I mean, I'm smiling so hard because you're taking me back to the early part of my career. I worked at a residential home and a lot of them had that, but it's like you see your child self come out because it's like bringing back your imagination. And it's like, okay, are these people demented or are they just tapping into their imagination, like when they were kids? Because it's like, it's so much fun. And then, they have the sundowners and then they come back. The sad part is they sometimes forget who you are,
yes,
and then you got to kind of balance your way between the two, but again, it's just what you make it, it's what you make of it.
yeah, absolutely. And that's also sort of part of the journey of solopreneurship, right? You never know what tomorrow's going to bring, but that's part of the
Never
fun
know.
of it, I think.
It
It's
is.
like each day
It
you
really
sort of have new adventures, right?
is.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
let me ask you now in terms of so just talking a little bit about your brand, right? So
Mhm.
you talk about incorporating chakra alignment and holistic practices into your coaching, right? So
Yes.
has it been a challenge sort of communicating that with it's a unique approach, but people often, for lack of a better word, there's this notion that there's some fluff, right? Also.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
just curious from a brand standpoint, how,
Yeah. So what I'll say is I think, when we're talking about experience and kind of tying that with our life experience and careers and things, one of the things that I learned about was brand awareness when I was working at my previous job.
yeah,
And there was a particular product that they had, and they didn't release it for a period of time because it wouldn't have resonated with the audience or with customers. And so when I thought about that and I thought about where I am, it's like 10 years ago, what I'm saying, people would be like, okay, she probably needs to go to the residential home, and be with elderly
yeah,
people. So I think it's really about, being intentional about how you're driving that forward and being, um, I guess, responsible with that because not everything is for everyone.
yes,
So I do send out assessments, prior to agreeing to coach individuals to let them know these are some of the tools that I talk about, so that they're aware, and see what their comfort level is. If that's not something that they're open to, then we don't include that as part of the process. But if it's something that they are, then we absolutely move forward with that. Now, it's not something that I chose to start throwing in there. It was actually part of how I, had an unconventional response to my son's death.
yeah,
Essential oils, aromatherapy. I think a lot of people kind of doubt that. And the way that I link, the synchronicity between what it is and what people think is, you can go into a grocery store and you can smell fried chicken and you can smell cookies, from the deli, and you weren't even thinking about that. But all of a sudden you want it
right,
because you smelled it, right? And so it triggers something. Same thing with, if you're going to have a surgery and you have general anesthesia, a mask placed over your face, what happens? It puts you to sleep. You inhaled that. That's the same thing that happens with essential oils, depending on what you're, using. There's one called Console, and it's for the purpose of consoling the person. It is aromatherapy
hmm,
for them to calm, and you can use it, as far as how to use it topically. You can put it on yourself, or you can breathe it in. And then when it comes to energy, um, I'm a living testament to that, as far as tapping in with your higher self. I think, we all can agree, and maybe we disagree, but there's a higher source, regardless of what we call it, God, universe, source, whatever it is. And we're an extension of that energy. And so being able to tap into that aspect of yourself and hone in on what that looks like to be able to help you move through life, I think is very important to be able to learn how to do that because it is something that we kind of push away because we can't see it. We're operating in the third dimension.
yeah,
And so we tend to shy away from that or push it aside. It's interesting because we don't see love, but we say, oh, we feel it. okay, well, we don't see our spirit, but it's there, it's just kind of breaking it down to
Yeah.
intricate. It's being very analytical about it, but breaking it down to someone that's open to receive those different approaches, then even that they learned something aside from healing through grief. They learn different tools to have throughout the rest of their lives that help them, with just different adversities. And those are some things that I was incorporating prior to my son passing. So when the adversity happened, it was like, I could slow down, have metacognitive thoughts, thinking about what I was thinking about, having it translate with how I felt and making a different decision, based upon that. Seeing I talked about it on another podcast, but it's energy, frequency, and vibration, spirit, mind, body, being influenced by my spirit. My thoughts are the frequency, and then my body is the vibration. That is just really, that's the formula. That's how I'm here, being able to have conversations and heal and grow. And, I grew up in a strict religion, and being able to accept other people as the divine in me sees the divine in you. I'm operating off of a spiritual aspect, not looking at our skin looks different or different things. It's like I can learn from you and you can learn from me, and when we put a lot of things aside, that's a holistic healing, full circle.
Yeah, and it's going back to that curiosity that we talked about a minute ago.
That is.
And, and
Yep.
and I completely agree with you. And I think that's a really great lesson too, is like people often tell me, well, if this person doesn't sort of like, believe in brand, for example, or storytelling, what are you going to do? And I'm like, there's nothing I can do. They have to
Right.
be ready to receive whatever I'm offering. And
That's right.
either they're not, or they will be later, or they may
Yep.
never be, right? You can't
Yep.
you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So I
That's
think of it
right.
as planting seeds.
That's right.
And, at some point they may feel like they're ready to receive that gift or whatever it is that you're
Yeah.
offering, but you can't
Yeah.
really force anyone. You can't
Yeah.
shove it
Force
down
it.
anyone's throat because it doesn't work
Yep.
that way. And also then
That's right.
it doesn't have any impact in my mind
No,
when you
no, you can't change the way somebody believes.
no.
You can allow your life and your experience
Yeah.
to test to it, and then if they're curious, then be there at that time. But you can't change people,
No.
and I think that's where a lot of us get caught up too. It's like if somebody thinks the way that they think and they make a comment, why are we arguing about it on social media? Let them think what they want to think, because you can't change that unless you just want to argue,
Right.
you know.
So let me ask you, what's been the most, you've talked about a lot of them, but what's been the most rewarding part of your journey so far, or rewarding moment?
I think what I had mentioned about this past Friday,
Yeah.
because it was the most recent, being able to be like, wow, like you are healed and you're going to continue to heal in different ways. Because I think, maybe the first year, if that day had have come and I didn't think about it, I probably would have been like, how could you forgive?
Forget. Right.
How could
Yeah.
you, let the day pass? And actually plan, like I said, plan to have people like plan like it was a birthday party. But I'm like, this year it was different. So being able to, even have that as an authentic, experience. It wasn't planned. It wasn't not planned. It was just how the day turned out.
Right.
And to be able to say, you made a very, intentional decision when it happened that you wanted your life to look, different than what people say grief is. And this is the result of it, not just for you, but for others that also loved him, was very rewarding, because it's like I'm telling people this and I'm coaching to this, but to be able to kind of just have things slow down and I'm in my home, in my room, and having that, realization show up for me as like, there's no way that you could have known that this is what it would be 4 years later, but
Yeah.
seeing how it is, it's encouragement to continue to move forward, and to let people know that this is absolutely the case.
I genuinely hope lots of people get to work with you, to see you, and to listen to this, because I think you can help a lot of people.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
let me ask you now, if you were to offer one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start like their solopreneur journey, what would you say to them?
I would say do a lot of research and make sure that you are committed to this process, because while it is rewarding, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Make sure that your why ties into who you are. because I think that was big. It's like there's several different ways of earning money, especially in today's world. But if you don't have that deep conviction of why you're doing it and it's part of your passion or who you are, then it can be easy to give up, because you're not seeing, results that are immediate. And it's just like, okay, well, let me go back and do something else. And even if that's the case, sometimes we do have to take a step forward in order to go back, which may mean that you're doing something alongside of, your solopreneur journey. But as long as you have that focus, like this is the end goal, I think that you're going to be fine because you show up and it's part of you. It's not, clocking in and clocking out. It is part of you. Those late nights, the, networking groups that might not be so much fun in person, everything you have the courage to talk to people in stores, you might not try to be, eavesdropping, but you hear something and you're like, you know what, I can help you. If you're an introvert, it helps you get out of, being that way because you're looking to provide a service that is you, so I think that if you're looking to do that, make sure that it aligns with who you are as a person, not just this is what I do, but as a person. And if you do that, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, no, I think the wise words, and you're right, because you actually can end up working more than you did in your corporate career, right? So if you're
Yes,
not enjoying it and you're not doing something you're passionate about and genuine about, then it's going to be a struggle. And also,
that's right.
one of my pet phrases now has become like, "If you build it, they won't come," right? Because it's like everyone has this expectation. It's so funny. Everyone I talk to, like, because there's this notion out there in social media in the world that all you got to do is put up the website and like put out a few posts, and the clients will be streaming in. Now,
No.
that's not to dissuade anyone. It's just to
Yeah.
know that, like you said, you articulated beautifully that if you put in the work and you sort of align with your passion and your why, then you will get there, and it will be a
Yes.
beautiful journey. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you find yourself,
yeah,
part of, some of the clients that I've seen, because, grief is not just losing a loved one. There's been some people that have reached out and it's been grief of losing a job.
sure. Mm.
And it's like, a lot of people, I've been here 30 years. I don't know who I am outside of that. There's a beauty in being reborn because something profound in your life has changed. And you have the unique opportunity to find yourself again and what that looks like because the you that went into that job is not the you that you are 30 years later.
Right.
The me that I was when I gave birth to my son was not the me that I was when he passed, and it's not the me that I am today. Things are constantly changing, and I think we lose sight of that a lot of times, and we just was like, well, what do we do? Look at what can come from this. What seeds can I grow today that will be able to see what's the harvest going to be? And I think it's fun. It's absolutely fun if you make it. So solopreneurship is absolutely one of those ways to do that.
Yeah, and it is filled with self-discovery that I can vouch
Yeah.
for too. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, Zuri, that we haven't covered?
Um, I don't think so. I'd like to thank everyone that chose to join in and listen. If this message, was beneficial for you, absolutely, please reach out. There is a free strategy call, so you might not know if this is going to work for you and you just kind of want to see, then I would offer that as well. But if it's something that, you feel will help someone else, then absolutely, have them reach out. But I think, again, the audience for just listening and being open to hear, what it is that I have to say, because I think it's an important message and it will truly, truly help people in the end.
I think so too. And that leads us to our rapid fire round.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw a couple of questions at you
Okay.
and just give us what you comes to mind. So
Got it.
what's a mantra or quote that keeps you grounded during tough times?
I don't know that it keeps me grounded, but it keeps my focus in, and I might not quote it exactly right, but Nikola Tesla said, if you understanding energy, frequency, and vibration, then you understand the universe. I think that plays through my mind quite a bit because it reminds me to not just move through the world as a physical being, but also use my other senses to be able to inhabit what's there so that I can translate things in different ways and use different examples to help people. So that's one that sticks out to me
I
a lot.
love that.
Thank you.
What's one corporate skill you're grateful you kept?
Oh, um, SEO, SEO branding.
It's useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was when I first started, recruiting for those roles, but the brand writers and stuff. And I was like, search engine optim. Let me write that down so that I could use that in my own business. But I think that's huge because knowing how to do that is how people find you. So,
Yes, true.
yeah.
What's
Yeah.
one piece of advice about grief you wish everyone understood?
That grief is your own, it's what you make it. It's what you make it. It is your own process. It's how you choose to look at it. One of the mantras that come to mind that I've made up for myself is God deemed me capable of having this experience and translating unconditional love through this process, because God knew that I would. I don't think everybody would be able to do something like this, but God saw that she's going to look at grief as love because that's where it started. And there's a saying that's going on out there that grief is love with no place to go. And my heart aches for people that see it that way, and if that's the way that they want to see it, it's great. But I'm here to say, have you ever thought about it this way?
Yeah.
Because this is true also. Two things can be true at once. That's one of my reflection videos that I did. But I think that if you just kind of slow it down and see, where did the root of that come from? And if it wasn't love, if it was inspiration, what happiness came from? Why do you feel that grief? Taking yourself back there and then following the breadcrumbs to get back to that emotion helps you carry out, that person's legacy and make one of your own from what you learned from that person. I think is just a wonderful thing to, embrace the beauty of what remains from what that person left behind when they ascended.
Yeah, it's a beautiful message, and it's one you live, as you said, right? As we
Yes.
discussed through this conversation. So,
Yeah.
if you could instantly master one skill to grow your business, what would it be?
Marketing.
We can
I'm
chat
learning.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm learning. I'm learning quite a bit,
Mm.
and it's fun. It's still very fun. But I think that it's just like, well, I'm a coach. I'm not a marketer. But then when you learn how to do it, I think that that is very, very rewarding as well. My brain's just very open right now. Because it's not tied up with a lot of corporate things.
Yeah.
Also AI. Just the different generations. I think about Gen Z and millennials and so on and so forth. I think it's a useful tool. I have different conversations with people, and some people are like, "I hate it, and it's going to ruin us," and other people are like, "I love it." I think that there's an in between. For me personally, I like using my brain. I consider myself to be a bookworm. I'm smart. I wear glasses sometimes, so I like nerdy things, but I like to use it to enhance whatever idea that I already have. I don't want it to think for me.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a balance with it, and being able to use it as a tool to, capitalize on other things, I think is wonderful. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I agree. In fact, I always tell people, tell AI what to do, don't ask AI what to do, which is exactly
There
what
you
you
go.
described.
I like that. Yeah.
If you could host a workshop anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Um, this is gonna sound so bad, but it would be in Egypt, and
Okay. Good.
yeah, in Egypt, in a village called Nubia. So I took a tour, a 12-day tour in Egypt. So literally went to Cairo, went to Luxor, went to all of these different places, cruised the Nile, and got to Nubia and was just like, I would just totally live here. We were able to go out and have conversations. I told my son's story. It wasn't planned because it was with a group of people, but I told his story, and it's just the ambience that was there was perfect. And it was the perfect atmosphere for people to really resonate and feel what it was that I was saying and walk away with something that was a gift. It wasn't something that they had to pay for. It was just very natural, but just the surroundings. And I don't know, if you've ever been to Africa, period. I've gone to
I
other
have.
places in
Yeah,
Africa. But putting your feet down, there's something about
I
putting
know.
your feet down.
It
It's
is. I
different.
tell people
It's
that. It's
different.
life changing. Yeah.
It is. It's so different. So I think to be able to give this message and have it be there, it would be easier for people to absorb because of the atmosphere there. and then they would, they would have a life-changing experience, not just because of what I'm saying, but because of their ability to, absorb it and implement it.
Just make me one promise that you'll send me an invite to that workshop, because I would love to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, that's a beautiful note on which to end the show. Zuri, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank you so
story
much.
and for letting me participate in celebrating your son. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
And
Thank you.
thank you so much. That wraps up another episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I would love to hear your thoughts about today's conversation. Let's continue the discussion in the comments below or on LinkedIn at Boost Solo. If you're looking to connect with like-minded solopreneurs and take your business to the next level, join our Boost Solo community. And if you're ready to turn your expertise into a story that sells, book a free strategy session at boostsolo.com. Remember, your story is your most valuable asset. Live solo or die corporate.